month, NASM is giving you free courses. That's right, free courses each month just for being part of the NASM family. Learn about everything ranging from nutrition to strength, weight loss to stress relief, and everything in between. Click the link in the bio for information and to claim your free course before they're gone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Random Fit. My name is Wendy Batts, and I'm here with one of my favorite people, Mr. Ken Miller. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Wendy. How are you?
I am fantastic. And again, I know I say this, it seems like every week, but I am extremely excited about this week's topic because we are talking about shoes. So
I love how we always talk about topics you're extremely excited about.
I know, but this one is pretty much on top because as a female, I will honestly say that I love shoes, especially shoes that you wear running, walking, in the gym, you know, just casual, quote, tennis shoes that you wear virtually. You know, anywhere well, for me, that's like my daily attire. I don't wear high heel shoes. I very seldomly dress up anymore. So, you know, I have to have different shoes for different outfits. And you know what? There's so much more to that.
Yeah. I hear you on that one. I like shoes too. I just don't like paying for them. It gets pretty expensive sometimes.
It does. And now, you know, of course, now my kid has starting to pick up the habit, like, oh, I need to have those, you know, because it's got this color in it and that color in it. But I mean, the purpose of us meeting today and talking about this is, I know Ken gets this question a lot. I do as well from a lot of my clients. Like, Wendy, I really need to get a new pair of shoes and I'm not sure which ones are going to be best for me. So what do you think? And there is so much more to that answer than I can possibly give because as we're going to talk about throughout this podcast, you guys are going to see that there are a lot of things to consider. You know, we're going to talk, you know, like even just what you call it, because I grew up, everything was a tennis shoe. Like, oh, we need to go buy you some new tennis shoes. But I wasn't playing tennis. And then, you know, in different parts of the country, they call them sneakers. And some, I mean, I've heard all different, what do you call them, Ken?
Training shoes, you know, just training shoes, because you know, one of the things that they also get confused with is running shoes, right? I got my running shoes, or I got like what you were just saying right there, Wendy, is tennis shoes, and I haven't picked up a tennis racket in 5 years, so that's what it'll be called: tennis shoes, sneakers, same thing. You know, what you guys call it on the East Coast is kind of what we call it on the West Coast too, but yeah, it is one of those things where, and like you said, you know, we get asked this question by our clients a lot, you know, what's the best shoe? What is it that I should be wearing right now? Because I have one client that comes to mind, and he came in for his first training session and he had the same shoes he's had for the last 10 years, right? Yes. And granted, it's been walking, you know, just walking around the house, playing with his kids. But it's the same. He's had the same pair of shoes for 10 years. It's his favorite shoe. But when you look at it, you know, the heel's all bombed out, and he's got definite wear patterns on them. And I'm like, hey, dude, Brian, we need to change this up because these shoes are not going to be good for you. You know, when it comes to the different things that we're doing. And then his next question, well, what should I get? You know, so it's hard telling some clients too. And you got to shop around. You know, you can go to a local running store where they might watch your gait and look at, you know, different things that you know, different types of shoes that might complement your particular feet and your foot structure and what it is that you want to do or what you're going to be trying to do when it comes to your workouts. But that question happens a lot, and you know, trying to match who the person is with the activities that they're gonna do that's a puzzle in and of itself.
I mean, I have the same experience. I had a lady that recently just started with me, and it was the same thing. You know, she had come in and her shoes looked new. from the top, because she keeps them extremely clean. And she's like, oh, I just wear these really around the house, or, you know, like I'll go maybe for a walk and stuff. Like I don't really wear them all the time. However, I've had these shoes for the same thing. Like she said 8 years, and I'm like, whoo. So I turned them over, and like you said, the tread was worn out in certain places. As a trainer, I found it somewhat helpful though, because I could also see, because of her foot pattern on her shoes, like basically how her foot strike would be, which allowed me to also kind of put my assessment results in to even more of a clearer picture by just looking at the bottom of her shoes. And so, I mean, it can be very beneficial for a trainer to see that. However, as soon as I said, well, we're going to have to get you some new shoes, you know, this is what we're kind of looking for. And she asked me about my shoes, and I'm like, oh no, like I don't work out in these. I just wear these to work. And she's like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, and you know, I tell her, I'm like, I've got certain shoes that I run outside in. I have certain shoes I run on my treadmill in. I have certain shoes when I'm doing leg day. I have certain shoes. Well, I have multiple shoes for leg day too, because that matches whatever I'm wearing to the gym. Because fashion's super important, as we talked about in another podcast. And then, you know, there's shoes that I wear out, you know, to, you know, my kids' t-ball games, or, you know, just out and about if I'm going to be walking or doing things on my own, that I don't wear those into the gym. And so it was kind of fascinating to her to realize that, like, I have a bunch of shoes for different purposes, and they all serve like a different purpose in my life. And so as soon as I told her that, she's like, fantastic. Can I get you to write this down so my husband understands when I go shoe shopping what I'm doing? So it can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on, you know, how much trouble you may get your client in if you tell them about your shoe situation. I'm going to call it a situation.
Well, sharing is caring, Wendy.
Right. You know, but you know, like when you think about it, I mean, like let's talk about like shoes and the different types of shoes. We got to think about the material, because the material is going to play, you know, that's going to tell you a lot. I mean, we're going to get into a little bit about the sole and the differences between, you know, training shoes and running shoes and walking shoes and some of the different brands. So we are going to kind of talk about that. But, you know, just first and foremost, if you have a shoe and it's all leather, it's going to be hotter. You know, it's not going to be it's not going to breathe as well as if you have mesh. And then, but it's going to be more supportive than if you have a more of a mesh type shoe. So, you know, that's one thing to think about. And then you also need to think, you know, specifically, like I do play tennis, and there are certain shoes you're allowed to wear on the tennis court. Or if you play basketball, there's typical shoes that you play in, you know, you play your sports in, especially court sports. So there are, you know, certain things you need to think about, like where are you going to use them and what's the purpose? And then again, too, you know, you've got some socks that have liners in them, and, you know, you've even got your track shoes where you don't wear socks. So there are, you know, multiple things to consider just when you're thinking about, you know, just some of the basics, like what kind of material do you want? How light do you want them to be? I've got some shoes that it seems like they weigh like air. They're nothing. And then I've got other ones where I'm like, man, these are super cute, but they're so heavy. Again, it's all about how you look.
It is about how you look, but you can change how you feel. So one of the things that I've noticed in the last 8 pairs of shoes, because I do wear inserts now, just because of, you know, the occasional run. And when I run, it's nothing big, you know, 2-3 miles, you know, at a time. But I do have these inserts that I've been using, and they've made a difference. But I've noticed that in the last, you know, 5 pairs of shoes so that I can take out that footbed, and it comes out. You know, before I used to have to like kind of really pull hard on it and, you know, kind of scrape it out. But they come out really easy now, and you can just put in your own inserts. So, you know, that's one feature of the shoe that I've noticed over the last, you know, more than a few years now. Over 8 years now, that you know, you can accommodate the shoe to, you know, to how you are. You know, if you do have an insert that you like. No, this is about shoes overall, but you know, you can personalize it, if you will, with a firmer or soft, something with more arch support, with an insert of your choice. So when it comes to the characteristics of the shoes, that has been a big one, that just passively I just noticed. But the mesh top has been one of my favorites, because, you know, if you're like I said, if you're running or if you need to just get them to dry out faster, that's been a pretty popular feature in my house, actually. If I'm not wearing flip-flops, that's that's basically that's what I'm doing. Although flip-flops, that's not a very good thing for your foot overall. Although coming from Southern California, it is. I think when you're born, they give you a pair of flip-flops when you're born in
when
San
you leave the
Diego.
hospital, right?
When you leave the
Right.
hospital, the little beanie, the little striped beanie, or the one with little footprints, they give you a pair of flip-flops with that.
Well, and I think you make a very valid point, because, when we think back in just kind of the last decade of shoes, I mean, I remember, when Nike came out with the Nike Air Shocks, and they, looked like they had a spring in it. But when you actually looked at the shoe, and you kind of really looked at, how it started up high because that's where the springs were, and then it kind of came down where the toe was. There was, people were they were complaining oftentimes after wearing them over and over again for multiple reasons, not just working out, but for running, because they were supposed to be more springier, and it was going to be better when you on a heel strike, when you ran, it was going to, allow you to have more ability to spring forward into your step. But there was more knee pain. There was more problems with people's feet. And, when you actually started to look at it, it was like you had your client was wearing high heels. And so, the functionality of that was actually harmful on a movement standpoint, because of just the positioning that it puts you in. And most people are already overactive or tight in their calf complex. And the reason why I say that it can be, it's not as beneficial as more of a flatter foot, or more one that's more protected. It doesn't put you up in a heel, like where your heel is higher, to an extent. I mean, there is going to be differences in some of the shoes we talk about, where a little slight elevation is different than a major elevation. But if you wear high heels all the time, and then you put these shoes on, or something that elevates you higher, and then you go and do things, and you're in that position for multiple hours a day, it's going to continuously make those calves tighter, because they're in a shortened position for longer hours. And so once you do take them off, when you get at home, you're going to notice that your feet are automatically going to what we have termed externally rotate, which just means turn your feet out. And that then can lead to issues in the knee or in the low back pain. And there's multiple compensations and multiple things that can occur just from having overactive calves. And so I was kind of glad when they kind of took them off the market. I mean, they still have the Nike Airs, which are super cute too. However, what's the purpose of you wearing them? Like I said, are you wearing them to be cute, or are you wearing them for a specific reason? And you need to know what that reason is, especially if you're going to work with clients, or if you're out personally buying your own shoes. You really need to know what is are you wearing these specifically to the gym? Do you need a good running shoe? Do you need a good walking shoe? Right. And then like you said, go to a place and have them evaluate your walking pattern or your gait, and find the best shoe for you, because we come in all different sizes. I got a small, slim foot, and Ken, you were saying you had to wear wide shoes, so we're completely different.
A triple E, which
wow.
I'll share that with our audience. So it's and that's a really big that's another big feature of a shoe that I was brought up to me by my physical therapist back in the day, is with my feet being as wide as they are, I had to go up a size, one full size, when it came to my footwear, because if I went with my size of foot, then my toe box was just my forefoot was really, really compressed. So I had to go a whole size up so I can get the width of shoe that I needed to accommodate, the width of my foot. So that wound up being one of the deciding factors on why I wear a certain brand or a couple brands of shoes that do size for a wider foot, or a brand that actually accommodates not just the length but also the width of the foot. So it's but fortunately they do make cute shoes in those sizes as well for me. So I'll say that. But that's another feature that goes into when you're giving your client some guidance on what kind of shoes to wear, is like, okay, well, does it accommodate the width of your foot? Because if you're like me, where I had to go up a whole size, now I've got a lot of space between my toe and the tip of the shoe, right? So, and that will affect your running mechanics as well. So you think, Is it, the firmness, the heel drop, or the size of cushion that you have in your heel, but also how does it accommodate the width of your foot? Again, you can talk about orthopedic issues with the foot, like with bunions, because if you have too narrow of a shoe, now that's going to pull that big toe in and shorten. And you're mentioning the calf complex, the Achilles, and now you can talk about the muscles that pull that big toe in, which can actually promote bunions just because of how your shoe fits, right? And that's not just a when we're talking about high-heeled shoes, or like business professional shoes, that especially for females, that tend to kind of narrow and point at the top of the foot. So you have to take those same considerations when it comes to your sneakers also.
So wait, let me get this straight. So, a small toe box that puts you in a point isn't good for your feet? Like, I don't understand.
No, Wendy. Yeah, the research supports that statement. I'm no podiatrist, but hey, that's something you need to look at.
Well, for those of you guys just joining us, Ken Miller and Wendy Batts, we are here today. We're talking about the shoe game isn't the same. And so, now we've kind of talked a little bit about how much we love shoes, and a little bit about some of the differences in the material, the brands, and some considerations when you're just thinking about the shoe itself. Right. But let's actually get into some of the differences. So, for example, running shoes, so when you're thinking about running shoes, they are built more with like a toe to heel type, type pattern. So where the heel drop is going to be a little higher in comparison to a cross training shoe, or, technically a training shoe, or it'll be different even in a walking shoe. And so because of how you strike the pavement or the treadmill or whatever it is when you're doing your running mechanics, there's more support there to help, your foot when you're actually going through that pattern, especially with the ground that you keep hitting. And so, there are specific running shoes, and that's the purpose of it. So when you're thinking about the heel drop, we're just talking about the extra support of where that support lies in the shoe in comparison to the entire bottom of the foot. Or the bottom of the shoe, I guess you should say. Yeah. So, but if you're talking about that, Ken, and somebody says, well, okay, what's the difference, to you, like when they come, what's the difference between a training shoe and a running shoe? Like, I don't understand. So how would you answer that?
Well, like what you're saying, when you're running, you're basically running in one direction. And that's if you're talking just like road running, compared to even trail running, which will have a different format on how it's built out. Because when you're trail running, now you're running up, you're running down, you might have some incline, decline, or you might have to, jump, run over rocks, roots, stumps, and things like that. So even that will have not so much of a bias towards that heel drop that you mentioned, but have more of a look of a cross trainer. So, which brings us to the other point of an exerciser who's now coming into my facility. They're not necessarily just doing running around the block for their warm up or what have you, but now they're going to be doing lateral motions. They're going to be turning. They might be pivoting. They'll be stepping up, stepping down, but you'll have to have a shoe that isn't so biased towards a thicker cushion in the heel, but something that's a little bit more, has maybe more of a broader base, evenly less of a heel drop, to accommodate you going multiple directions without putting you at risk for things like ankle sprains, which, that's one of the harder things when you are working with groups. If you're a personal trainer working with groups, in that I like to look at, okay, did you wear your running shoes today, or did you bring something that's designed for more multi-directional cross training, if you will, when it comes to, how am I going to have you do, cone drills, box drills, things like speed ladders, where your feet are going to have to not just go forward or just to the right, you might have to pivot and turn. So we want to make sure that your shoe does accommodate that. So if you're doing just general workouts in the gym, and while we're talking about the gym, there are some specific shoes that you can wear also, like a weightlifting shoe, which is going to have a harder sole and give you a little bit more stability. So if you're more of a power lifter and you're doing more of a, let's say it's your squat day, that's when you're going to take out the more of your harder soled weightlifting shoes, because it is giving you some solid support. So, and that you would wear on, the days that you would be specifically on the platform and not necessarily running or jogging or doing anything agility wise. So these are the things that I kind of guide my clients on, as far as educating them on the difference between, okay, if you're going to run straight ahead, or if you like, hiking in the Oakland Hills or running in the Oakland Hills, then, let's look at one type of running shoe versus another type of running shoe. But if you want something that's going to be an all-around gym shoe, let's kind of get away from the running shoe and have you something a little bit more safer for multi-directional performance.
Very well said. I mean, when you think about it, training shoes they're gonna have a comfortable like upper and flexible midsole. So like to use like to your point when you were talking about the multi-directional movement, that's the purpose of that. And with it, the lower heel drop is going to put you closer to the ground, so you will easily be able to push off and pivot. And in all reality, you don't necessarily want that when you're running. However, I often get this question. Well, you just told me to go buy a training shoe, but now you're asking at the end of the workout, we're going to go and do some sprints, or we're going to do sled pushes and stuff like that. Like, is this truly, the best shoe for me? And the answer to that is yes. And so based on everything that I've seen and what I've read, anything that's shorter than a 5K, if you're in a training shoe, and to your point, this isn't the same thing that you're doing every single day, or you would want to invest in an actual running shoe, then that's totally fine. And they have something called, cross training shoes, which what that means is it just often, it's the same thing. It's just offering more support throughout the entire shoe. So it's pretty much offering support from toe to heel. And so there's not any, differentiation between the heel and the toe. And it usually has a little bit of a wider toe box when you're thinking about a training shoe, which, like to your point, you need that, you want to have good ability to open up your feet and use that. And so, I know we're going to kind of get into some of these injuries and everything, but I think it's also important to really talk about arch alignment. And so arch alignment is really important. And we're going to talk about some of the different shoes that don't offer that support. But when you are going into a gym, or when you're running, or when you're doing any kind of activity, it's important to look at the arch of your foot. And if you have a high arch, then, you want to take that into consideration. And a lot of people will tell me, well, I'm flat footed. And it's like, well, were you born that way? Because there are certain people that, that are born with a flat foot. And then there's other people that over time have lost the arch of their foot. And that's mainly because those muscles have weakened, causing what they call pronation, which just means causing your arches to fall towards the ground. And so one way to work on strengthening your foot, strengthening the muscles that protect your foot in order to, actually be able to excel and to decrease knee pain, hip pain, and everything like that, is really work on balance training. And, there's so many benefits, and we've talked multiple times about balance training, but if you really want to have good strength in your foot, good strength and ability to move more efficiently, especially through the foot and ankle complex, doing balance training is going to be extremely important if you want to build your arches in order to maintain good alignment, so you don't have to rely on so much support in your shoe. I mean, again, you want that support when you're going to be paving the pavement over and over again. You need that cushion. But if you're actually looking to be in the gym and you find a pair of shoes that you like, however, you're like, gosh, these really aren't comfortable, or I feel my arches, or things like that are happening. That's just something I wanted to throw in there before we got too deep.
Well, and going back to what we first talked about, when we have those clients that are coming to you, they have that, like your client had an 8-year-old pair of shoes and my client had a 10-year-old pair of shoes. And if they come, here's the thing, if they bring in these pair of shoes that have worn down in such a way that actually puts you in a posture position where it's making you over pronate or evert, right? So your shoes themselves can be putting you into a bad position. So now if you're going to, let's say, like what you're saying, Wendy, is do these, you're doing these balance exercises, but if it's pushing you into a position where you're pronating now, it's actually because you have no arch support and the inside of the heel is gone. So now it's putting you into a pronated position. Well, guess what? If you're trying to now do balance exercises with these old worn out shoes that actually now complement and make make your compensations worse, you're still not going to recruit the muscles that you want. So you can be on one leg all day long if you want, but you're not necessarily strengthening the muscles that you're intending to strengthen. So if you're trying to strengthen the muscles that support the arch of your foot, kind of get that arch away from the floor, then you could be doing the exact opposite from that vantage point. So which is another argument for why we need to reevaluate what shoes you're wearing, because you can do all the strengthening you want, all the balance exercises, all the stability exercises you want, but you're not going to get the effectiveness of the strength training if you're using an old shoe, right?
Yeah, and there are actually a lot of risks. I mean, to your point, it's when you're training in the wrong shoe, and you start to notice like there's something different happening to you that's not a positive thing. Then look at your shoes, because if there's discomfort, there's a huge risk right there. It's going to lower your performance, and people are like, well, I don't understand how that can happen. And we can go into more detail about that. And of course, we just talked about injuries. But I mean, the big thing too is, you want your shoes to be comfortable, and you have to make sure that they're a good fit. I mean, to your point, you had to go up in a size. They've told me when I ran marathons and half marathons that I needed to go up a size and a half for swelling of my foot. Well, I tried that, and it actually caused me to have blisters. And, I was like, what is happening? And apparently my feet don't swell. So, having a shoe that was too big based on someone's recommendation, because I was just learning more about the differences and what shoe was going to be best for me. I thought it was kind of fascinating to me to be like, okay, this is what most people, maybe it's because I wasn't good at running a marathon or a half, I don't know. But, I did find a really good shoe. I trained in that shoe, and I never had any problems. I didn't have any issues with my knees. I didn't have any issues with my feet. I didn't have blisters, didn't have shin splints. That's another common thing that can happen. Plantar fasciitis. You hear about people talking about that kind of stuff. So, I mean, there are a lot of, things that can happen in a very negative way by training in the wrong shoe, or just, not understanding that there are differences for a reason.
How many marathons have you run, Wendy?
I ran one full, and then I run a half every year. So, and I've done that for the last 15 years. So I wanted to run one just to say that I did. And then I realized that was not very smart on my part, because I hit mile marker 16. And then I thought, oh my gosh, instead of being like, I'm 16 in, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got 10.2 to go. Exactly. So I totally messed with my mind. That's when I needed to go back to our meditation podcast that I needed a long time ago. Once I started running a half, I'm like, this is a piece of cake, But as I age, I need to actually work to that, because I would just, do my own workout and stuff and never really train for it. Now, if I don't train for it, I'm going to be in big, big trouble.
Like you, I did one marathon, and that was, I did the cardinal sin of changing my shoes without having trained in them. I ran in a new pair of shoes. So I went sight unseen. Well, I tried it out. I did like what we were talking about. I went to a running store. They looked at my gait. They made their suggestion for the shoe that was sized for width. And this was my exposure to that whole idea. It was sized for width, whereas I was wearing shoes that were too big, and my feet were dying by the time, it's not the marathon that kills you. It's the training for the marathon that really gets you. But you know what? I came out on the good side of things, because after the run, my feet were fine. It just took, it beat up the rest of my body for the next week and a half is what it was. But I changed my socks. I had the insert. I had a new pair of shoes. And I was just thinking, around mile 19 or 20, I was like, man, I would have been dying if I didn't change my shoes. So I came out on the better side of things. But like you, I've done more halves than anything else. I think I'm up to 18 or 19 half marathons. But yeah, once you check off that box for the marathon, then that 13
one
miles
and done.
it's easy. Now it's easy. Get off the couch and run a half marathon.
Sure.
in flip-flops if you want now.
Well, those of you guys that are just joining us, my name is Wendy, and we're here with Ken Miller, and we're talking about the shoe game isn't the same. So we're talking about the differences between the types of shoes and how do you know which ones are best for you. And of course, we've talked about the differences of really truly understanding what size is appropriate, what width is appropriate, try to think about some of the different types of material, the differences we've covered, obviously, between running and training. And, the big thing too, is if you start to really have some issues, it is a time to step back and see what you changed. Like if you have always been running in a certain pair of shoes, then you change brands, that can be significant because every shoe and every brand is going to be different. And so there are, I guess I should say there is a specific shoe that I run in. And I love it. And I get the same kind of shoe every year. So I get the new shoe every year for this because I've never had an issue with it. I can run in it. I don't have any issues. However, before that, I was having, I felt like I didn't have enough support. And then I was like, oh, this one caused a blister, or oh, my pinky toe is starting to hurt, or oh goodness, like the top of my big toe doesn't feel right. And the thing is that is an indication that probably isn't ideal for you. And also think about mileage. And so, whether you're walking, whether you're running, or even like to your point, you're in the training, you're in a training shoe at the gym, they do wear out. And so even though they may look beautiful, there's only a certain, and you need to ask that if you go and you're working with someone, just say, approximately how many miles are on these shoes? Like how many miles do I have? And they're going to give you a ballpark figure. Again, I found it fascinating. I'm like, really? Because these look really pretty good. And once I trained for that my first real marathon, I trained in those shoes. I wore them for the race, and technically I was done with them. So then I just wore them out and did yard work in them and stuff like that, because I'm like, well, I don't want to run in them. Like I was all paranoid. So mileage is important to keep up with too.
Yeah. And, and that's when my shoes get bombed out. Those are the shoes I take out when, walking my dog.
Right.
Because you don't care where you walk or if you step on something. But it's those good shoes, though, that I'll say that if you find a good pair, that's when you go back and you buy another pair. It doesn't matter, how, what year they came out. But if you find a good shoe, buy multiple pairs. And that's one of those things that I've adopted, is just getting multiples of a shoe that really works well for me. That way, when one gets bombed out, I can wear the other one, or I can wear both of them and kind of rotate them both between either, whether it's having two pairs of running shoes or two pairs of cross trainers. That way, if I'm working out or if I'm running, let's just say, since we've been talking about running so much, then if you have a shoe that's definitely worn down, then you're just going to repeat the same wear pattern over and over again in the same shoe. But if you have complementing shoes, they could be different brands of shoes. You can rotate between the two shoes. That way, you have some variability of how you're exposing your body to impact. And when you think, you're running 2-3 miles a day, I mean, if you're a 6 mile, 10 mile a weeker, then that's a lot of repetitions when it comes to consistent exposure to the same wear pattern of the shoe. So if you vary it up a little bit, you can divert stress, and even as small as it is, different stress is still variable training, and as far as how you can look at how you're exposing your foot and ankle, your knee, your hips, low back, to stress. So that's something that I'll tell my clients too. If you find a shoe that you like, because I have another client that comes to mind, and she wears a shoe for 5 days. She's like, it's like, you got a new pair of shoes? Yeah, the last ones I wore, they hurt, right? So once she found the shoe, it's like, buy another pair today. If you like it, you feel good in it, go get it.
Yes, and if you get the wrong ones, again, you will know pretty quickly. And so don't fight it. Just either, a lot of times people will say, if you wear them a couple of times, you don't like them, bring them back. Again, I don't usually buy ones that I don't like. So then I'm like, oh, I'll just use that for something else. I don't suggest that because it can get pretty pricey. However, that's usually what I do. But, we keep talking about, okay, so we've talked about obviously the running shoe. It's going to have more cushion in the heel for the heel strike. Then we talked about training shoes that are going to be made. So, you can do multi-directional things. It's going to not have that type of, like heel support, if you will. It'll be more consistent throughout the entire shoe. And then when you think about walking shoes, they're more rigid and they have more cushioning just basically in the heel area. So that's kind of the difference between the walking and the running shoe. And cross trainers are pretty much consistent and have extra padding throughout the entire shoe. So we keep talking about padding in different shoes, but what are your thoughts? Because, there's differences between, and people have talked about this. You've got your minimalist shoes, you've got barefoot training, and then you have something called the zero drop. And so in your opinion, like what are kind of the differences? And then, how do you feel about them personally?
Well, let's talk about my feelings about them personally. First.
Feelings.
I like them actually. I mean, I've got a couple pairs that I'll wear just because, I do feel more grounded and connected because you do feel, with less padding and less elevation. I mean, you haven't, and from what I'm experiencing and when I wear these shoes is that you're more in touch with the ground. Like you feel the pebbles, you feel the rocks, you feel, the different things, which again, when it comes to, shoes overall, one of my buddies, Anthony Carey, I forget who he heard it from, but when you talk about shoes overall, shoes can be looked at as a sensory deprivation chamber for your foot, right? Because with all that padding, cushioning, and all that texture, you are numbing the foot, quote unquote, numbing the foot to what's under it. Well, you have a high concentration of receptors underneath the foot, which we deny, stimulation when we do wear a shoe, whatever shoe it is that you're wearing, whether it's a running shoe, a cross trainer, or whatever. But when you have a more of a minimalist or a shoe that doesn't put a lot of distance between the sole of your foot and the ground, you're more apt to stimulate those receptors. So if it does allow more pronation, supination, because it doesn't have a rigid toe box, you are allowing more of the foot to contact and feel the ground under it. You're going to stimulate those receptors, and a lot of people will make the case that if you can stimulate the receptors, you're going to stimulate the muscles, and you're going to have better recruitment, like with what you're talking about with balance training. You have better recruitment of the muscles of the lower extremity overall. So I personally love them, and when clients do come in with them, not having me tell them to buy it, but if they come with them, I'll tell them, we do have to train you for it, especially if you're coming from a regular running shoe or cross trainer that has given you a lot of support over the years. Now you're going to go straight to this minimalist. You actually have to work towards getting used to them, because if you're now having to have the foot and ankle now do a lot more work than they had to before when they had a lot of support, then you are subjecting somebody to the potential for injury, because it's night and day now, because you're having the foot do something that it hasn't had to do for a very, very long time, if ever, depending on how often you wear shoes. So I love more of the minimalist type shoes, because it does allow your foot and ankle to do a lot more, but you also, on that same note, is you have to be prepared to wear them. So there's, it's a give and take, but if you can graduate yourself responsibly and progressively, then it's one of the best things I think you can do for your foot.
And there actually are training guides out there that will teach you how to go from like a running shoe or a very high support shoe into getting into the minimalist or the barefoot ones, for sure.
Yeah.
So I read through it. I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like go to a park, walk in the grass, do different things like that just before you even buy these shoes, and see how you feel when you're touching the earth, and then seeing how your body reacts to that, because it is different. And, I've unfortunately had clients that went, 0 to not, like they were super high, very supportive to this shoe. And then they ended up having a lot of problems. But when you looked at their movement pattern, their arches fell in, their knees caved in, they did that kind of stuff on like their assessment process. So that would not be an ideal shoe for someone to wear daily for hours on end until we worked on proper, activation of certain muscles. So therefore they could, because it's supposed to allow you to move freely and move the way that you were intended to move. It's just, we've been moving and we're habitual people. We move in these compensations for so long that becomes our new normal. And so it's not easy to say, well, we were born barefoot, shouldn't I wear these shoes? It's like, well, yes, but you haven't been wearing those shoes for however many years you are, or since you started walking. And so that's a big consideration to take in. I am like you. I personally, I have them. I don't wear them often, meaning that like for a lot of hours on end, because of the different things that I do. I do need certain support because I can't go out and run in them like some of these amazing people that can. I mean, you look at a lot of individuals that are running some of these unbelievable events and they don't have shoes on. They're truly running barefoot, not a barefoot shoe, not a minimalist shoe. They have no shoes on whatsoever. And they're just like these beautiful pumas running in the wind with like exceptional form. And like, I'm like, how do you do that? First of all, but you know what, it's, they've toughened up their feet, they've strengthened the muscles, and that's how their body responds best. And, when you look at what the premise of minimalist shoe was, it was less shoe, more you. And I thought that was genius because truly that's what it's for. Yeah. But just realize you really need to train yourself to get to that. And once you do, and we've got really good friends that post all over Facebook that are in these minimalist barefoot type shoes, and they look fantastic in their movement patterns. And, but right now, until I've worked my way to that point, I would never be able to move like that.
Well, never say never, Wendy. You just have to.
Right now. I guess I should say right now.
You just have to work for it. Yeah. And, and that's the thing. You just, instead of, I think when those shoes first came out, like you said, people were just complaining about my knees hurt, my foot and ankle hurt, my low back hurts. But, that's when you're going from 0 to 60 in no time at all. But if you, like you said, you get them, walk in them, then, go around the block, then go around 2 blocks, and then just gradually work your way up to them. But I think concomitantly, and I will use the word concomitantly, you do want to do like, those balance exercises, toe strengthening exercises, make sure that you've got, the requisite range of motion through the ankles, as you mentioned the calves earlier. So from that vantage point, I mean, it's something that you do need to strive for, because the feet are basically, literally where the rubber meets the road, right? And if everything starts from the ground up, you take care of your feet, you give them the most opportunity that you can afford to get them to work the way they're supposed to work, then everything else up the chain will work better. So if you can do those, exercises and movements and do right by using those minimalist shoes, then, more power to you. But a couple things have to converge, using the right shoe, doing the right exercises, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think it brings you back to your point about rotating. It's okay to like wear your barefoot shoes, throw on something that's a little more supportive, come home, take your shoes off, walk barefoot for a while, because the thing is it's just different, like you said, different variabilities, different ways that your body's going to have to change, because life changes every day and it's very unpredictable. And the ground that we walk on is very unpredictable, with hills and flat and, cracks in the road. I mean, so you get what you train for. And that still follows along with the NASM OPT model. It follows along with most people's training. And so there's a time and a place for everything. But I guess my takeaways are just, it's more than just how cute they are. Okay. Yeah. And that's, there is truly a purpose for different types of shoes, and different brands are going to be able to serve people's foot differently. Being able to have someone look at your arches, think about, ways to strengthen your arches, strengthen your feet. But, just realize that you may need multiple shoes for different things. And if not, what is the thing that you're doing the most of, and where are you going to get the most bang for your buck? And I think that's when we come with the shoe game isn't the same. It's really not, because
No.
they're all different, just like us. We're all different.
Yeah. And I think, just to kind of sum that up, is that, you need to look at your shoes as it's a piece of equipment, right? It's not like I'm changing a handle of what exercise I'm doing for the upper body, or what, dumbbells or cables I'm going to use. I mean, you're going to have your shoes on you the whole time you're in the gym. If you're working out with shoes or running, so they're on your body the whole time you're moving. So you need to look at it as a piece of equipment, and just like any other piece of equipment, you want to make sure that it fits you and your needs and the purpose of what exercises you're doing. Like if you're going to do some cardio that day, or if you can do multi-directional work. So that's that's my takeaway, is that you need, how we look at shoes beyond fashion is, let's look at it as a piece of equipment. So
and it's worth the investment. I mean, I think that's the big thing too. I mean, I know they're expensive, and sometimes the higher quality shoe or the more supportive shoe may be more expensive, but if it works for you and it's going to keep you healthy and moving better, it's definitely worth it.
Right. I agree. I agree with a lot of things you say, Wendy.
Thanks, man.
But no, this was a great episode on a shoe. So I appreciate you, Wendy, and your insights, and just as importantly, for you guys that are listening, we appreciate you being here with us for this episode of Random Fit. And as always, if there are things that you want to hear us talk about when it comes to Random Fit topics, please don't hesitate to reach out to both Wendy and I, or just wherever you listen to your podcast, comment and let us know what you want to listen to, and we'll be sure to touch on that if it fits within our programming. So follow, like, share, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you on future episodes. So everybody, take care and be well. We'll see you soon.